Grab a plate for the best of the Bay, Saturday night starting at 7 on MPT.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
If you're looking for flowers for Mom on Mother's Day and love the soothing sounds of jazz, then downtown Westminster, Maryland is your destination on Saturday, May 7th for the Flower and Jazz Festival. A great event for the entire family.
Start your wellness journey today at the Wise and Well Center for Healthy Living at Keswick. Stay active, stay connected, stay wise and well. Call 410-662-4363 or learn more at choosekeswick.org.
Are you a Maryland renter at risk of being evicted? Or a landlord with tenants that have fallen behind in their rent? Maryland's Emergency Rental Assistance Program may be able to help. Through the state of Maryland and your local county government, you may be eligible for up to 18 months of rent relief and assistance with other eligible housing-related costs. To learn more, visit rentrelief.maryland.gov or call 877-546-5595.
This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of State Circle focused on the Chesapeake Bay. Coming up, restoring a once segregated beach and how psychology could play a role in restoring the Chesapeake. But we begin with a changing of the guard at the Bay's largest environmental organization. We spoke with the new leader of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Hilary Falk.
Well, I grew up in Baltimore City, but as the daughter of a photographer, I spent a lot of time on the Chesapeake Bay. And if you had asked me at 7 years old what I wanted to do, I would have told you stay in conservation, and I was passionate about the Chesapeake Bay from that moment of messing around in boats and soft shorelines. And so when I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to come work at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And I did that first as an intern and then as an employee at the Port Isabel Island Center. And so my first start at CBF was living in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay on Tangier Island. And it was a remarkable experience.
I like to think I've been everywhere on the Chesapeake, but Port Isabel wasn't on the list.
Yeah, well, it was an education, not just because I was educating, but because I learned about the grass beds and the experience of watermen working and collecting and harvesting crabs and oysters. And that experience was just foundational for me. And I loved the experience of being at the heart of the Chesapeake Bay, but also we, at the time, were bringing down legislators and farmers and also talking about the impact on the Bay from their perspective. And it was a wonderful education, too, in what we all needed to do collectively to save the Bay.
This is Tangier Sound.
Yes.
Which is almost Virginia, lower Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
It's a long way. So who were you educating? I understand bringing in some VIPs, but in terms of students, there were just a handful of people nearby, right?
Yeah, so we were, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has an island education center, and so we were educating kids from Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania who were coming down to really be in the heart of the Bay. And those experiences from seagrass beds to looking at oysters and all of the times where kids were able to see and experience the Bay was really an incredible experience. I got that was my job for 3 years. And I also got to know many of the residents on Tangier Island next door, and also Smith Island, where I spent a lot of time as a child. And the islanders are incredible, and their experiences are also part of the story.
The importance of people being able to see things like that firsthand. I mean, we believe in the power of television, but there's nothing like being right there and seeing the challenges. And in that spot, the challenges aren't just pollution and the bay-wide threats, rising seas, rising sea level, and the land itself sinking, right?
Right. And I think the one thing, when we talk about the future of the Bay movement, one of the big pieces I think that we all need to focus on is the impacts of climate change, both trying to stop the pollution that's creating climate change and adapt. We need to adapt and build resiliency into our communities, into our landscapes, because we know that the Bay is changing.
Your previous position, Chief Program Officer of the Wildlife Federation. Tell me about that work and how you thought about having an impact nationally, globally, as opposed to that little marsh in the Southern Bay.
Yeah, well, I was hired by the National Wildlife Federation to launch a coalition to protect the Chesapeake Bay. And that was my first experience at the Wildlife Federation. And I built the coalition at the time they were looking for a Mid-Atlantic director to expand the program and look at water quality issues in the Delaware River, work on climate adaptation, and environmental education. And I thought that would be a wonderful way to spend a career. And I didn't. And then that led to other opportunities. And I got the chance to run National Wildlife Federation's 7 regional centers. So I got to spend time on the Great Lakes and learning about legacy pollution, and then spent some time on the Mississippi River Delta and experiencing how they were addressing issues, especially how they were looking at land creation in the Mississippi River Delta, which is a big issue. And then Western conservation, connecting the West in places that were really segmented, and looking at mountain lions in California. And so there was no shortage of challenges, but a whole lot of really incredible people, incredible challenges that were being met with really strong community-based solutions and people pulling together for wildlife and for people. And I think that's another important lesson that I learned at National Wildlife Federation, is the importance of making sure that people are part of the story with wildlife, with the living resources, because I think that's a much more powerful story.
And the challenge for an organization like that, an organization like this, not only doing the outreach work and calling attention to things, but you need to go find the resources to be able to do that. How's the current environment for private support, government support?
I think it's really great, and I believe it's growing. I think as more people feel connected to the issues that are local to them, or they see themselves as part of the solution. But I think private foundations have played a huge role across the country in protecting places and working with organizations. And so I saw a lot of engagement and passion in those foundations, and the nonprofit community being partners in looking at the biggest conservation issues of our time.
What's meant by the term equity in the context of the environmental movement?
Yeah, well, I think of 2 things, meaningful engagement and fair treatment. And I think one of the ideas is that the community itself, and CBF is part of that, hasn't supported, hasn't figured out how to best engage everybody in the work. And there are still an incredible number of environmental inequities. And we need to make sure that as we're improving places, water bodies, that we're doing that for everybody, and that there have been people who we've left behind, communities we've left behind who are on the front lines of environmental injustice, and we need to make sure that in the future that isn't the case.
Let's delve a little bit into the challenges of the beautiful Chesapeake Bay right behind. It looks so nice on a day like this, and the trouble is all below the surface, as they say. In layman's terms, explain the issues that you think are most important to the Bay right now.
Yeah, well, I'll say, we don't always think about the Bay and think, people who are closest to it, I will say, aren't like we're hugely successful. But I think what we have seen is success, and that has been the fact that we've seen a 3rd improvement in water quality, while we've also seen a doubling of the population at in that same time.
The human population. We're not talking fish.
No,
right?
Not fish. But I think through the years we've been able to focus, reduce the dead zones, for instance. We've been able to improve fisheries, and especially since the 1980s and 1990s, when a lot of the the crab fishery and fish fishery were hitting lows. And I think what we need to do is look back and celebrate the success we've seen bringing sturgeon, American sturgeon back. And I think there are some great specific examples where we have seen success, and we need to build on those. Right now, we're headed towards an important deadline in 2025, which is the year when all of the Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint practices and policies are in place in order to restore clean water to the bay and rivers. And with that, we have a huge opportunity to really improve the Chesapeake Bay and the rivers and streams. And we're gonna, we're doing an incredible amount of work to get to that point, and we need everybody's help in order to do that.
Everybody's help includes the people up in Pennsylvania. So if we look at the water behind you, and we go north to the headwaters of the Chesapeake Bay, which is the end of the Susquehanna River, near the Conowingo Dam, a little bit south of that. The bay starts, if you can count the Susquehanna, way up in upstate New York, and then flows through Pennsylvania and picks up a lot of pollution, a lot of sediment, and it's maybe a little bit more difficult for the people in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg specifically to feel about the bay the way we Marylanders do, because they just see this river, right? I mean, I know it's a key challenge. Yeah. Getting Pennsylvania to do more.
Well, and I think the opportunity is that Pennsylvania can help us not just clean the bay, but can help us clean local rivers and streams in Pennsylvania. And so we've been saying recently that Pennsylvania is the keystone to our success. And with Pennsylvania, there are some great opportunities to bring state and federal resources to, so many people in Pennsylvania who care deeply about clean water. And we just need the state legislature and support from the EPA and USDA, federal agencies, to bring money to support technical assistance and farmers who know what we need to do and want to help us, because we know that improving farms is going to improve water quality. And so I think that especially right now, Pennsylvania's behind, and we need Pennsylvania to catch up, and there's some big opportunities on the horizon for Pennsylvania to do that. We also know that Maryland and Virginia, while they have been doing an incredible amount of work, also are behind in terms of the deadline. And so we know that all the states need to really pull together at this moment so that we can return clean water to the Chesapeake Bay.
And I don't want to imply that we're doing everything perfect in our backyard. I mean, we just saw the failure of a big sewage plant in Baltimore. Just because the funding has been put into facilities like that doesn't mean it's going to work right.
No, and I think that was an important lesson, that we all need to be paying attention to stormwater and wastewater sources, because we can't take our eye off all of these different sources. It's not just agriculture, it's across the board, and we have a responsibility to make sure that everybody is doing their part.
Our thanks to Hilary Falk. Now MPT's Nancy Amata reports on restoring a segregated part of Chesapeake Bay history.
The documentation of the African American experience on the Bay has been unreported throughout the years. And this is an opportunity to not only put a dot or a pin on a map, but to preserve the dirt.
Or in this case, the sand, as it may be. Vincent Leggett, the founder and president of Blacks on the Chesapeake, says it's high time you know about what took place here at Cars and Sparrows beaches in Annapolis. From the 1930s until the 1960s, it was a happy place during a dark time in our nation's history.
During this period of segregation, there were a lot of restrictions with parks and golf courses and beaches and libraries and public accommodations. And so with this Cars and Sparrows Beach, it was a carve out where people could go and enjoy themselves, not have to look at white-only signs or color-only signs.
It was the destination for music lovers who came to hear some of the greatest voices of our time.
So they had the James Browns, the Billie Holidays, the Sarah Vaughns, the Ella Fitzgeralds.
Icons who were beloved but also faced their share of hardships.
And many of these entertainers couldn't stay at majority facilities as well. So Cards and Sparrows Beach also had cottages and places that they could rest and enjoy themselves. And so it was the entire whole industry built around music, but also built around business and enterprise.
For the mixed crowds who gathered from Memorial Day to Labor Day,
they didn't have any color line. They didn't have any color restrictions, but music is universal. Food is universal. And when you get a combination of food and music together in the same complex, all were welcome.
Soon, these stories will be preserved and shared as that 5-acre parcel of land will be turned into a park where visitors can learn about the past and have public access to the Chesapeake Bay.
It'll be a nature park. I see it that way. We'll re-envision the beach. We'll do a pavilion.
Annapolis Mayor Gavin Buckley helped convince the developer of the land not to turn this slice of the Annapolis shoreline into condominiums.
You only really get one shot, if you develop everything, if we privatize every piece of waterfront, we lose something that's special about living on the Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of potential there, so we're so excited to move forward. And we're really grateful to the governor for recognizing its importance in the state, and also for Senator Ben Cardin for earmarking $2 million for this project.
Funding is also coming from the county and the city of Annapolis.
This is a park that both shows how we've grown and highlights some of those some of that history that we're not so proud of.
Joel Dunn of the Chesapeake Conservancy hopes the future park will be an homage to the past and help connect people to the natural resources of the bay.
I see it as a symbol for the conservation movement, the future of the movement, being inclusive, thoughtful, parks for everyone. And, we've got a lot of work to do, though. This is just the start of the next chapter of the conservation movement, where we highlight everyone's history.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
Our newsmakers this week are Amy Handen, Program Coordinator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and Steve Robbie, the owner of Opinion Works, a market research firm. Thank you both for being here. You're working together on a project to help change the behavior of people in the Bay watershed. Amy, tell me about that project. What are you hoping that we all can improve on?
Well, what we've designed is really a powerful tool that helps practitioners, local governments, and watersheds around the Bay watershed learn and understand what behaviors residents of the watersheds are taking and what they would be taking in the future, and to help these practitioners and local governments design campaigns that influence and inspire local action.
Steve, you've done some market research to support this. What were you looking for? What did you find?
Well, as Amy points out, there are small things that we can all do in our daily lives that will add up to a big difference when you add up all the 18 million people that live across the Chesapeake Bay region. And so what we did is we worked with the Chesapeake Bay program to design a survey instrument that would assess just what it is that people are doing today and what their likelihood is to adopt some of these healthy for the Bay habits in the future. And so that's what this is. It's a diagnosis of the public, in essence. What are we doing and what are we willing to do in the future?
It's one of the things I've worried about in the context of the Chesapeake Bay for a long time, that the population is sort of a headwind, because it's not just that there's 18 million people in the watershed now. This is a great area. People keep moving in. There's going to be 19 million and then 20 million. So we all have to minimize our personal footprint a little bit to just avoid inadvertently contributing to problems in the Bay.
Well, that's right, Jeff. There are plenty of actions that residents of the watershed can be taking, like planting trees, installing rain barrels, conservation landscaping on their property. So there are many opportunities for individuals to get involved and take these practices.
Yeah, I looked at the website you put together, and maybe this was by accident, maybe it was random, but the first thing on the list was picking up dog poop.
Well, you'd be surprised how much of an impact that can make when bacteria counts in, let's say, Baltimore's harbor are analyzed. A lot of it comes from animal waste that doesn't get picked up. And so, yeah, these are the little things that we can do, and they really do add up when you consider the large population across the region. So all of us can make these simple little changes in daily life, and it makes a magnificent difference for the Bay.
All right, so let's get into how you convince people to make those little changes. The idea of, there's a lot of research in behavioral psychology. What do we learn from that can help us modify people's behavior without passing, a specific law to pick up your dog waste?
Well, social science tells us that information frequently doesn't necessarily do a great job in changing behavior, and that more thorough strategies are needed to inspire people to take actions that they probably are interested and willing to do, but just have perhaps some barriers that might be preventing them from taking those behaviors. So we like to utilize an approach called community-based social marketing, which is a process that local governments and watershed groups and practitioners can take to help develop a plan to influence and inspire their residents to take these stewardship actions.
Is there a model for, you said community-based social marketing?
That's right. That's right. It's a methodology rooted in social science that has a several-step process from audience identification to behavior selection. And the great thing about this website is it provides a step-by-step process, and it informs the user and to learn about this process and to be able to adopt it in their own community.
So the website itself is sort of, in the business world, it would be B2B as opposed to B2C. The website itself is not a consumer-facing thing.
Well, I think consumers could have interest in it because there is information there about what we're all doing. I mean, I think it could be quite interesting, but no, you're right. I think the main audience for this website is the practitioner who is trying to get their neighbors or their community members to all band together and take some of these actions that we're talking about. So that is really who this is geared towards.
All right, so based on this increasing body of research, in sociology and marketing and behavior change, if we're trying to get people to put in rain barrels or maybe use less fertilizer or pick up after the dog, what are the do's and don'ts?
I'll give you an example of rain barrels. Rain barrels is a great example where we've learned through this tool and other research that we've done that 1/3 of the people that get a rain barrel never install the rain barrel. So the rain barrel sits out behind the garage or something like that. And, so this social science work is premised on the idea that good intentions alone or information alone may not be enough, and that a person may need something just a little bit more, a little help. And in the case of rain barrels, people are nervous about cutting their downspout, or they don't know exactly where to locate it in their yard and that sort of a thing. So sending out a volunteer who's familiar with those things, who can help install the rain barrel, is just that little bit of help that a person might need to actually install and then empty the rain barrel between rainstorms. So with every behavior that's on the list, there are things like that we can do to kind of make it easier for people, to give them that little nudge or bit of help or that reminder or whatever it is they need to take the action.
And in terms of rain barrels, people may not be familiar with the purpose of it, but the idea is we have a big gully washer, and a lot of things get washed into the tributaries of the bay. There's a lot of runoff. You slow down that process a little bit, you get more water seeping into the ground, and Amy, you improve the process that way.
Right. So it enables a homeowner or a resident to capture that rainwater, and so it does not go into the waterways, and the homeowner can use it to water their plants and their gardens. And so it enables that water to seep in that way.
Did we just say in maybe a too complicated way that if you give somebody a rain barrel and you install it for them, they're more likely to install it than if you just drop one off?
That's exactly it. Yeah, and that's exactly it. And there's a lot of examples like that of, people like with dog waste, which you mentioned. You get out there on the dog walk and then you recognize that you've forgotten the plastic bag that you need to pick up the dog poop. And so having a little station out there in the park or in the community setting where there's bags that you can use is just that little extra thing that makes it possible for people. So this is all about making it easy and convenient.
Boy, the world is so politicized now. Is a rain barrel a political statement? And would some people, maybe that's a motivation that some people would want to signal that they're big on the Chesapeake Bay by having a big rain barrel out front. I don't know if there are any community association issues there, and maybe some people would feel the other way, would be put off about it if there seemed like there was political pressure of any kind.
I just want to say, Jeff, on that there are very few ties that bind us all together here in Maryland. People love the Ravens. There are things that you can sort of say, cut across. The love for the Bay, the deep concern for our natural environment is something that sustains Marylanders across the board. And we see this in our research. And so a rain barrel is not, people don't view that as a political statement. It's that little extra thing you can do to get on board and help. And so, no, I don't think any of this is politicized. It's amazing kind of how much consensus there actually is to help the Bay.
And we all like to feel good about ourselves, right? I mean, that's a way to take a little action, or picking up after the dog, whatever. Before we go, let me ask you about fertilizer, because what I see, they're not called ChemLawn anymore, but they're companies that put down a lot of fertilizer. I don't know how much they're regulated, but everybody likes to have a green lawn. I don't think there's any negative stigma associated with having the greenest lawn in the neighborhood, but that stuff does run off and into the Chesapeake Bay and cause problems, does it not?
Certainly does. There are best practices that we all can take in our lawns to make sure that we are not harmfully impacting our local waterways. And so residents should do their homework and make sure that they're learning about what they're applying to their gardens and their lawns to make sure it doesn't impact their waterways in the Bay.
Our thanks to Amy and Steve, and that is State Circle for this week. Remember to follow us on Twitter @MPT News. We're back Monday with Direct Connection, your chance to ask the experts. Join us live Monday evening at 7. And now for all of us at MPT, thank you for watching and have a good night.
You can discover the behind-the-scenes story of the historic White House restoration. Jacqueline Kennedy and Henry Francis DuPont, From Winneter to the White House, opens May 7th.
University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration, while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.